be clear. And we also saw how to make a model and all of that. But again, that is something that we will see again today. Okay. So today we are focusing only on the practical aspects. I am not going to explain the theory again because we have already seen that. So in terms of theory, we have the MVC architecture, we have what each and every file does, all of those things we have already discussed. You can watch the recording for more. Right now, coming to the setup. So I'm going to go to the terminal, and to create a virtual environment, we have to use the command. So in my case, it is Python 3 -m, right? MENV. So VENV, sorry, this is going to create the environment, and then whatever name you want to give, you can give the name. This creates a folder. You can see my world. Again, these are Mac commands. The Windows command is also the same for this. And then the next command is actually different, right? So in my case, I want to activate the environment. So I'm just going to run the command for that. And you in Windows, it's a different command, but that's fine, right? So this is the command for Mac, source, and then my world bin activate. So as soon as I do this, you can see my world shows up. Now I am assuming that in some Windows machines, it is not showing up, because in the previous session, there were a few people who were not seeing this, but it's fine. Once you run that activate script, you should keep going. You can keep going. Don't worry about this. So if you don't see this also, this my world, this indicates that we are in the environment. But even if this does not, even if this does not show up, it's fine. We can just continue to the next part, right? Now, in the next part, what we can do is we have to install Django. So we can say pip install, and this could be sudo. So sudo pip install, and then Django equal to the version number. So double equal to 5.0.6. This is the latest version. When you run sudo, it will ask you for the system password. You can enter the system password, and then in a minute, it will install the latest version of Django for this environment. Now, remember, if you make two separate environments like I have done, so for the previous session, I made an environment in the session 10 folder. Today, I have made another environment in session 11 folder. So none of the installations that we do in one environment carry over to the next environment. That's the whole point of creating this virtual environment. That nothing within this environment can go out or come from outside. It's a self-contained setup in itself, right? So that's our setup. So we have already written this, right? So we've already done this. We have installed Django. So this time, like now, Django will be available on this environment as well, and not just on the, like, we cannot access the Django installation from another environment. We have to reinstall it on this environment again. So every time we want to use it, we have to reinstall it, right? So we have done that now, and now I can run clear to clear the console or clear the terminal. And now we can actually start with our project creation. So the command for that is Django admin. So once Django is installed, we then get access to this command, Django admin. So if you are facing an error like Django admin command not found or something like that, then that means you forgot to install Django, which is you did not run the previous command. Now, once you run this command, we can say start project. Okay. And then we can give the project name. So I'm going to call it notes. Okay. This is the sample project that I will use to showcase the functionality to you. And then we'll create the book reads thing as a separate project in the next, like in the last 3 sessions. But for today and tomorrow, like this session and the next session, we are working with this notes project. So I'm just calling it notes. Now, as soon as I do this, you can see a folder gets created for the project. We have already seen the files. So manage.py is the starting point. And then we have already seen that ASGI and WSGI are basically setup files. Init is for initializing constructors. URLs is where we will spend some time today. So we'll add a couple of things here. And again, in settings, once we create the sub applications, we'll add those over here, right? So this is the project folder. Now within this, we can create the app. So for this, we have to cd into this folder first. So cd notes, we are moving into the notes project. And then within this, we are going to, let's say, start app. Okay, so this is going to be a single app, and I'm going to call it my note. Okay, so on my notes. So this is the app that we have created within our project. You can see within the notes folder, we cd into the project folder, and then we create my notes. Right, so this is our setup. Okay, so this is done. if you want to check any of this, or if you want to make sure that this is working fine, you have to first go to notes settings.py, and then in the app list, okay, we have an app list here, installed apps. So here we have to add this new name that we have just added, which is my notes, like this. So every time you add a sub application, remember I told you a bigger Django project has a lot of mini apps. So whenever you create any app, you have to come to the project settings and mention that over here. This is the only way your project is going to know that this app is actually a part of the project and not an individual thing on its own. Okay, so this is done. And now we can go ahead and we can test it out. So to test it out, we can first try for migrations. So we can say manage.py and we can say migrate. Okay. So we have to run Python 3. So Python 3, that's the command, manage.3y and migrate. Now, as soon as I do this, again, we have seen this already. So this will do a couple of things for us. It's all internal. We don't have to worry about it just yet because we have not written any code. Okay, but we have to migrate, and we can also write another command, which is make migrations. Okay, so this will check for changes. No changes detected. Perfect. So now our project is good to go. So we can run it. So again, we can say Python 3 uh, manage.py, and the command is run server. Now, once we do this, it will give us a URL. And on that URL, you can see now we get this output. Now, we'll of course change this today. That's the main focus of the session. But yes, this is the default output that we get once we run that default project that we have received. Okay, so we can stop it with Control C and clear. Let me know in the chat if this is clear, because I am not going to repeat this now, but we have already repeated it twice, so thrice. This is the entire setup for creating a Django project. So in the chat, just let me know like a yes or clear if this makes sense, and we'll move to the next part. So I just wanted to repeat it in one flow entirely so that you understand it properly. And now we can go ahead and move to the next part. The error that you're getting, this is BB underscore 21A81. You don't have Python installed, I think so. Please check that. And your command is, yes, no module name Django, right? You can see the error. It says no module name Django. So please install Django first with pip install Django, and only then it will work, right? So your Django installation is missing there. Okay, perfect. Great. So now let's move to the next part. So in the previous session, I also told you one more thing, which is creating a model, but let us do that again. So whenever we are working with the Django project, we have three things like we have already discussed, right? We have, model, view, and controller. We've already seen this. We've already talked about it. So a model is basically a blueprint, right, of what are the different data items that we want per entity, right? What is the data that we're dealing with effectively? We specify this in our model. Then view is going to be our front end or the UI side of things, which is where we specify what to accept in request, what to respond, all of that. And then controller is what decides how they work in sync. So when should the control be passed to which model? All of that stuff is taken care of by the controller. We have already discussed the theoretical aspects of it. Now, let's go to the practical aspect. And what I will do here is, first of all, so I will try to show you the entire process really slowly, step by step. The first thing that we want to do, right? The first thing that we want to do here is that we want to create our model. Okay, we want to create our model. Priya, I have shared the GitHub link in the chat. You can take it from there. But yes, so the first thing that we want to do is to create a model. Now, for creating the model, we have to go to our app, not the project, the app. So within my notes, we have a folder called, we have a file called models.py or models.py, right? So this is where we will define all models that will be a part of our app, which is my note app. Just like this, we can also have other apps, like shared notes or whatever. But for now, I'm keeping a single app, which is called my notes. So we can create our models here. I can remove that comment. Now to create the model, we only need one import, but I'll show you one more unique import in just a minute. But for now, we have already imported this, right? Imported models. This is something which is available to us from Django. You can see from Django import models. Now we have to create a class for our own model. So that class is going to be called note model in my case. And then we have to inherit some functions, some methods which are available in this models class. So to inherit this, we can say models dot model. Okay. So this is going to be the syntax to inherit the code which is available in this model class. You can see it is a class, right? Class model. So what do we need here? Well, we need a couple of data items for a note. The first thing that we need is the title of the note, and this is going to be a character field. So we can use a built-in function, a built-in method or char field or character field for this. And here we can specify a couple of values. So we can say that the maximum length or maximum length of characters, number of characters in the title can be 200. Similarly, we can say that the title of the note should be unique. For example, no two notes can have the same title, right? Any two notes cannot have the same title. If we enter the same title, it will give an error. It will say that already a node with this title already exists, for example. So something like that, an error will be thrown. Okay, this is the first thing. The second thing that we want is we want the content, right? So this can be the actual content of the note. For example, the note title can be cook food, and the content could then contain ingredients, recipe, whatever. So this is going to be another thing called text field. So this text field is another built-in function available in the model class, which gives us a longer piece of text. So like a paragraph long, right? You can think of it like a big paragraph or even multiple paragraphs. So that's what a text field contains. Then we can have something called a category. Okay, so this could be a note category, like maybe completed, not completed, whatever it is, yet to start, ongoing. You can define it. It's your app. So you can define whatever, or we can call it status. So up to us. Okay, we can use whatever term we want, right? So now this can be, let's say, models dot boolean field, right? Now boolean field will basically be true or a false value. So we can just put boolean field maybe. So the default status can be false. Like when we create a note, it can be false by default, which means it is pending or incomplete. And we can change it to true later, which means it is done. It's completed. So we can just mark it as true. Then we have two other fields to create. So that's created at, and this is going to be date time field. And this can automatically be taken from the system with this auto now add true. So when we do this, what is going to happen is it is going to automatically take the current date and time from the system. Okay, it's going to take the current date and time from the system. So that's our setup. So this is what we have done so far. Okay, that's our setup. And just like created at, we will also go for updated at. So we typically keep these two fields, created at and updated at. So created at will obviously be when we create the item, and then whenever we make any changes to it, we can, keep a track of the latest change, last update. Okay. Madhu, we can use max length here also, but typically we don't because that's the purpose of a text field. If you want to have limited length, go for char field. Otherwise, if you want to have a longer unbounded thing like no limit, because content could be anything. Maybe somebody types in a single sentence, the other person might copy paste an entire document. You never know. Right? So that's why we don't usually put an upper cap on the text field. If you have a control element, then you go for a character field with max length. Right? Text fields are usually unbounded, so we don't put a max length because again it could be anything. So it's the most dynamic setup you can get. Now, in addition to this, we also want a unique ID. This is important. So we want to have a unique ID. And for this, we have to install another thing called UUID. So I'm running pip install UUID. Okay, there is a module or a package called UUID, which is basically unique user identification, UUID. unique user identification. What this package does is this package gives us a lot of control over what kind of ID you want to create. Because writing the logic to create an ID ourselves manually will take a lot of time. So instead, what we do is we use this built-in package. Okay. So for this, we can now import UUID. We've installed it already. To install it, we run pip install, just like we ran pip install Django. In the exact same way, we can run pip install UUID. So UUID is a package which we have now imported as well. And this package is going to give us access to something called the UUID field. So just like we get the character field, text field, Boolean field, datetime field from the model class, in the similar way, we get something called the UUID field. Okay, UUID field with the help of this package. So it's an external thing. We have added it. Okay, we've installed it externally and now we can use it. So here we need a primary key equal to true. So this ID is going to be the unique identifier in the table. So we set the primary key to true. Then we can use the default value that it gives, which is UUID dot, and we can use the version 4. So each version you can see here, it generates it from a host ID. This every version has its own way of working. Okay, so each UUID variant 3, 4, 5, each of them has its own standard. 5 is the most secure, but it is very time consuming, right? Because it creates a very big unique ID. So it takes a lot of time to convert. So in case of really secure applications like banking, etc., we might go for UUID 5. But for day-to-day usage, UUID 4 is preferred, right? So this is the default. And then we also want to remove the edit access. So we set the editable to false. Okay, let me quickly tell you what we have done here. So to create this unique ID, right? Each table in our database must have a unique ID, which is how do you uniquely identify every element in the table? How do you uniquely identify every element in the database rather? So we can write some of our custom logic. We can say generate a random number. We can do that in Python. We have functions like rand for generating a random number and all. So we have a few functions that are available for this. But again, there is a very interesting package, okay, which is available to us, which we can use to create these IDs. So unlike other databases which automatically generate IDs for us, SQL or MySQL does not automatically create an ID. We have to explicitly specify the ID whenever we insert any record, whenever we create any note in our case. So what we are doing is we are telling the note model that there is an ID field for which we want to use a special package and another package called UUID. So UUID stands for Unique User Identification, Unique User ID. Basically, what this package does is it gives us access to this UUID field, just like we have these other fields that are built in. So this character field, text field, Boolean, date time, these are built into Django. Right? They are available to us within this model class. But this UUID field is not available by default. So we are installing it with our pip command. Then we are importing it into our project, and then we can use it like this. So we are saying models.uuid field, and we are specifying a few constraints. So primary key equal to true, which means this is the primary key for the table. Then the default value. Now here we have several options. We have 1, 3, 4, 5. We can choose from one of them, but 4 is recommended for normal use cases. And if you want really secure ID, you go for 5. But when you go for 5, creating that secure ID takes some time. So it takes, a couple of seconds longer than UUID 4 because it is more secure that way. So in case of like really complex or really secure apps like banking, etc., we might want to go for 5. Otherwise, we stick to UUID 4. And then we are saying that this can never be edited, right? So typically in a note, title, content, status, these should be editable, right? These are editable fields. But in our note, we never want the ID to be changed. Even if we edit the data, the ID should never be editable. The updated at will be editable, content can be changed, status can be true, false, title can be changed, but ID should never be changed, right? So these are the three constraints: primary key true, default value as well as editable false. So this is our model that we have created. Now, in order to connect this model to our database, or in order for our database, which is the SQL database, we'll talk more about this in the next session. I'll talk to you more about SQL later. But basically, we have to just specify some additional data in the meta class. So we create a nested class. You can see within this class, we are creating another class. Okay. And this is just going to contain a couple of things which are again necessary for the table. So this is just like our HTML meta tags. They just provide, this class just provides some additional information about our data. So we usually provide two things. The first is, the table name. So we want this model to be stored in a table called notes. So whenever we write any SQL query to fetch data, update it, delete it, we will do it with the help of this table name. And then the ordering should be in terms of created at. So it will keep the notes in ascending order, not descending order. The default is ascending. We can specify constraints again. You can check this out. So this will contain a list. We can specify the descending order as well. But for now, we'll just stick to ascending. So we are ordering them by created at. Finally, we define one more thing here, which is what should be returned when we create a new note. So basically, whenever we create a new note, we just want to return the title of the note. Okay, that's it. So these are a couple of things that we have to specify before we can use this model. So we have created a new model which contains these fields. In addition to this, we are providing some additional information, some metadata. One of them being the table name, then in which order should they be maintained, and then what should be returned every time a new node gets created. So whenever we create a new node, it will automatically return the title. If we don't want this, we can go for a pass. So this would mean don't return anything, right? But we typically want to return the user. Right? For example, if somebody creates a note, we want to give them a message saying this note was created. So for that, we are just taking the title so we can send it in the response. Right? So when we write a response to the user, we should be able to send it back. So whatever data we want to send back, we are getting it as a response, right? Ordering. Okay. So ordering basically is in which order do you want to maintain the data, right? So typically we want to maintain it by created at. So imagine that this is our table. Okay, the default order is random. It will choose one of these fields, right? So it might keep nodes by title. So all nodes starting with A will show up first, then with B show up first, then with C will show up like that. And this will happen if you choose title, basically. But in our case, we want it to be maintained in the order of creation. So whichever node was created based on the timestamp, say you created something at 2 p.m., that will be stored. Then the 3 p.m. node will be stored after it. Then the 4 p.m. node will be stored after it, like that. So whenever we get them back out or whenever we get any output, etc., they will be returned to us in this order, as opposed to following any other random thing, like title, whatever. We want them to be returned. We want them to be accessible with the help of the creation time. Okay, creation date and time. That's what we have here. So that is ordering. You can use any of these fields to order data, but typically we go for either created or updated. So latest, if you want to get the latest note, you go for updated. Whichever note was updated the latest will be shown first. But normally we don't do that, right? So in some note applications, you will see that whenever you update a note, it shows up at the top. In some other nodes, it won't move. It will just stay there. You can see the nodes in the same order every time. So that's what we are trying to do here as well, right? So that's created at and updated at and done. Now, this model is created. So step one is complete. We have created our model. The next step is to go ahead and register this model. That is done in our admin file. So in the same app, we have, just like where we have models.py, in the same folder, we have admin.py. So over here, what we have to do is we have to go and register the model. So to get access to the model, we have to import them. We have to import the model, and that can be done like this. We say from dot models import, and then it will give us access to all models available in our project or available within the app. So from dot models, When we say dot models, it means all models available within our project, not outside, not in Django, but within our app only, right? So in our models.py, whatever models are available, we can access them like this. And then we can register it by saying admin.site.register and just pass the model. Okay, so note model, that's it. This way, our model is now registered to be used within our app or within our project. Now, once we do this, we have to again make migrations, right? So again, we can go to make migrations. You can see that it is showing us migrate for my notes. There is one migration needed, create model, note model. So now first we run make migrations. This shows us that you changed something in this app, and then we can run the migrate command. So once we run the migrate, the actual migration will take place. So it has applied the migration, and now again, our project is synced. So whenever we create any model, whenever we register any model, we have to make migrations and then migrate, no matter where you do it, right? Let's say you have another app which is called shared notes, and you will have to do the same thing for that. Okay. So for every app that we create or every project, whatever we change, we have to always make migrations that will show us the changes that are needed to be done, and then migrate. So that will make the actual changes. Make migration will not make the changes. It will just list down all the changes that these are things that need to be done. And then when we run the actual migrate command, that's when the changes will take place, right? So now I will give you guys a couple of quick minutes to catch up with this. I will actually just update this file in the chat, upload this file in the chat. Okay, I just want you to get it in your project as well, because I really want us to be able to see the output today, like for everybody to be able to see the output today. So I'm just giving you this models.py file in the chat. Okay. So you can just download it, copy the code into your project. Okay. So take a minute to do that. If you have not created the project yet, please do create a new Django project. You can call it whatever you want. Create a new Django app with the start app function. You can again call it whatever you want. And then this is our model. I've already shared this file in the chat. Okay. Once your model code is set up, please go to admin.py and then register the model like this. Okay. And in the terminal, I am keeping the commands for migration. So these are the two commands that you must run. I'll just keep them in the terminal. So first you run this command, make migrations. Remember, you need to be in the project directory for this. So make sure you CD before you create the app. Right? After you create the Django project, first CD and then start app. And once you copy paste the code, then Python manage.py migrations and Python manage.py migrate. Once you do this, we should then be able to move to the next step, which is to create a view. For this model, there is one more step called serialization. So we'll discuss that when you're done with this. So I'll give you 5 minutes. Okay, please let me know in the chat when you're done creating this model, and then we'll move to the next part. So I'm right here. If you have any questions or doubts, please put them in the chat and I will help you out. I also have YouTube Live open on the side. So even if you are watching on YouTube Live, just let me know if you need any help. Okay, but I can't share the file on YouTube. So I have done that on Zoom Live. I will add it over here, I guess. I'll just call it. So I'm just calling it temp.py. Okay, and I will just paste the code over there for this. So again, for people on YouTube Live, you can go to the GitHub repository and take it from there. It's in a file called temp.py. Okay. So I've given you guys the code. Please take a few minutes, set that up, and let me know in the chat once you're ready. So just put a ready, done, completed, whatever. So I know you're good and we can move to the next step. Okay, perfect. So I hope that some of you were able to do this. What we have done so far, if I have to quickly recap, what we have done so far is we have just created our first model, right? So a model basically tells our application what kind of data we are dealing with. So in the model, we basically specify whatever data we want. Again, in the chat, there are a few syntax questions. This is standard object-oriented programming syntax for Python. We've already covered this earlier, right? So I took it in one session, and then there was one more session where this was covered. But either way, the point is we use the class keyword to create a new class. A class is basically the blueprint, of an object. So basically, we can create as many nodes as we want. Each node that we create will follow this structure, right? So each node which we will move to next, that's the next step. Each node that we create will basically follow this pattern, right? Every single node will have an ID, title, content, status, created and updated, right? So this is what we call a class. It's a blueprint. It's a generic blueprint for every node that we are going to create, right? Now, based on this class, what we are doing is we are telling the application or telling the project by registering our model that this particular model is going to be our basis for the data that we receive from the user when creating a new node. Okay. Now, the second step here, after we create a model, is to create something called a serializer. Okay. So can you guys quickly tell me in the chat? Remember, we had this entire discussion on JSON. Can you quickly tell me in the chat what was the full form of JSON? We talked about it, right? I told you when we were talking about API, I told you that JSON is basically used as a mediator when sending data between applications. And I also gave you the restaurant example where JSON data is like the waiter, right? We can speak in whatever language, and the kitchen staff can speak in whatever language. As long as the waiter is able to understand both languages, we are good, right? So in the exact same way, we what we want to do next is we want to do that translation logic, or we want to write that translation logic such that whenever any data comes to our application, we should be able to convert it from JSON to Python object. And then from our app, whenever we send any data, we want to convert it from a Python object to a JSON object. So we will now write the code to do this conversion for us. This is called serialization of data. It's a standard term used in all backend frameworks. We call it data serialization. That basically means converting data to and from JSON, right, to whatever language you might be using. Now we are using Python, but the same thing will work for Java, PHP, any other backend language that you have. So for this, we have to create a new file. Okay, so in the My Notes app that we have created, I am creating a file called serializers.py. Again, it's a very important file, and you have to name it exactly this, serializers.py. Okay, so that's the name, serializer. Okay, I misspelled it. Let me rename it again. So Serializer, Lizer, Serializer. Okay. Again, it's a standard name. So yes, like all of you are saying in the chat, JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, which basically works like our currency. And you want to buy a 10 rupee pen, you go to a shop, give the 10 rupee note, you get the 10 rupee pen. If you go to the shop with a 10 rupee chocolate and try to exchange it for a pen, that's not going to work, right? But a currency will. So in the exact same way, when two applications want to talk to each other, they have to agree on a common data format, and JSON is that data format. So in this serializer, what we want to do is we want to convert data to and from JSON. For this, we need to import another or install another module, just like we installed UUID. This is called REST framework. Okay, so we have to run pip install Django REST framework. Okay, let me copy this command for you. So I am keeping this command on the screen. Okay, it is pip install Django REST framework. Just like we installed UUID for getting help with unique ID creation. In the same way, to get help with data conversion, we are using this package called REST framework. Okay. So now from this installed package that we have from REST framework, which we just installed, we will import the serializers. Again, this does not come default with Django. This is something that we are installing additionally, right? So that's the first import. And the second import is our model. So again, from dot models, import the node model. That's it. Now, we already have a built-in class in that package. So just like we created a class for our model, we can create a class called node serializer. Okay. And then we will extend or inherit that class. So this is going to be model serializer. So it's more or less the same setup. And then we have the meta, which will basically be like, which is the model we are dealing with. So it needs some extra details, node model, and which fields do we want to serialize. So we can say fields equal to, and then underscore underscore all. So this means we want to send, get or receive, send or receive everything. Okay. So again, first step is to create a model where we are telling the project or we are telling Django that this is the data that we're going to work with, right? So that's what we have done in our models file. The second step is to make this model capable of understanding JSON. Okay, so that's what we are doing in this serializer. So what we are doing is we are installing or importing an external package called REST framework. This package will give us access to some code which is going to help us serialize the data. Okay. Then what we are doing is we are using that package to serialize, create another class called serializer, which is going to serialize this note model. And we are also telling it that we need access to all fields. We want to serialize all fields. If you have certain private fields, for example, maybe your if it's a banking application, then a bank number, like your account number could be private, or your password could be private. So in those cases, you can just use a list instead of a all. So you can provide like title, context like this. So this would mean that we will have to basically we can then go ahead and specify exactly whatever fields we would need. Otherwise, if you want to go for everything, which is what we want here, we can just specify underscore underscore all, and again double underscore before and after. So this would mean take all fields and serialize them. So serializer is a second step, which basically means that we are now able to how do I put it? Get or send, right? Send or receive this data in the JSON format. So that's the job of a serializer. So whenever we receive any data from the UI, it will be first sent to serializer that will convert it from JSON to Python object. Then it will come to our model logic. And here, whatever code we write in the view, which is our next step, that will happen. Similarly, whenever we want to send anything as a response, it will go to serializer. Serializer will convert it to JSON, and then that will be sent to the user, right? Great. Now, the last step, or the second last step rather, in this journey is to create something called a view. Okay, so that's what we are doing next. Now, this view is the actual endpoint or the actual front end. You can say not front end, we call it endpoint, which is where the user request will be sent or where the user can get the response, right? So that's what we call a view. So here we need a couple of things again. First thing, from REST framework, we want to import something called response, so that we are able to send response, right? So that's the first import that we need. So we can specify this from REST framework dot response, import response. This is for sending the output, right? Then again, from REST framework, we need a couple of things. So import, we need something called status, which is again, if the request is failed, success, 404 not found, whatever that would be. And then something called generics. So this is going to create the request for us. Okay. And then we need our model. So from dot models, import node model. So again, in every file that we use the model, we have to import it. Okay, done. That's everything that we need for now. And then we also need a serializer. So from dot serializer, so we can import the node serializer. Done. Okay. So again, I will tell you what each of this is doing once we use it. Now we are going to create a view which is going to let us say, first maybe get something from the user, store it, and then send it back. Okay, so we're going to try to do two things. We will try to read something from the user, we will store it, and then we will try to return all nodes that we have. Okay, so for that, we again create a nodes class. This is going to be called a view. So remember our MVC architecture: model, view, controller. So model is already done. Now we are creating the view. After this is done, we will create the controller, right? So now we are creating our view. And again, here we will use generics dot generic API view. So this is where we are using our first import called generics. So this will allow us access to all standard features like reading data from the user, sending response to them, etc., etc. Okay. So now the first thing that we want is we want to specify our serializer. This will be node serializer. So we are basically saying that whatever data comes and goes in this view should be serialized using this particular serializer, right? The second thing is we are specifying something called a query set. Okay. Yes, I will explain the whole thing again, but let's just finish this once, right? So query set, which can then be node model. So this is basically specifying what data that we are dealing with. So we can say objects dot all, which means we are working with everything, right? All the nodes that we have available. Okay. Now in this view, we want to have two features. Like I said, the first thing should be we should be able to send everything back to the user, right? So for now it will be empty because there is no note. And then we will want to write some logic to accept a note from the user. So to receive a note, the note must contain title, content, and status. These three fields must be provided by the user. Okay. So yes, now in the get, we will say self and request. Then we can say nodes is equal to node model dot objects dot all, which means fetch all the nodes that we have. Then we have to convert them to JSON in order to send them back. So that will be serializer is equal to self dot serializer class, then nodes again. So again, this syntax is a little tricky, but either way, I'll tell it once again once this is done. And then uh, many equal to true. So this is the setup. The T must be capital here. Done. Then let me show you the functionality once. Once you see the response, then it will make more sense. Then we return the response at the end of the day. And then in this response, we can pass in that these are your notes. Okay, and that will be serializer dot class. So this would dot data. This would be everything that we send. So basically what we have done so far is we have written one endpoint, right? This is what we call endpoint, API endpoint. We have already talked about APIs. I have told you that there are 5 types of APIs. We have create, read, update, delete, right? So these are the 4 operations that we perform, CRUD operations. This get is for reading data. So basically a get request will be sent by the user when they want to read all notes, from our system. Okay, so that's our get request. Then within this, we are simply writing the logic. So we are saying that we want to get all the nodes from the table. So that's what this will do. This is what we have written here. So it's going to take all the nodes from the table. It's going to serialize them, which is convert them to JSON, and it's going to send that serialized JSON as a response. Now, the final step, the controller part is in the URLs file. So again, we have to create a file called URLs. Okay. Just like we created a serializer file, in the similar way, we create a URLs file. And this is going to be where we write our controller. So here we say from Django.URLs import something called path. So path is again the URL that the user must type to access that functionality, right? So when we, for example, we use the random user API, we type right randomuser.com or that.me/API. So that is the path that we're talking about here. Then we have to import the view that we have just created. So we can say from dot views import the note view. Okay, so that's called notes. If you check our views, the view is called notes. Okay, then we want to make this view available to the user. That is written in something called URL patterns. And here we specify a list of all the routes, all the paths that will be accessible to the user. So we say path. Okay, yes, let me just show you the output once so that you understand this better. Just give me 2 more minutes and then we can write the code once again. That's fine. Okay, now here we have to specify notes dot as view. That's it. Okay, so this is our controller. What this means is whenever somebody accesses this path, which is empty path, then the user is going to see the notes view as the response. Okay. So for now, what I will do is I will also type a message. This is response so that we can see something. Okay, done. Finally, in the project URL, we have to tell the project that we have a separate file which is taking care of the URLs. So at the project level URL, we can go ahead and we can specify an additional path, which is going to be our notes path. Okay, so we can remove the admin path and then I can say path slash API slash notes. Now this is a custom path. You can call it whatever you want. Okay. And then here we have to import. This is not needed. We need something called include. Okay. And finally, I can just write here, comma, include, and we want to include the notes URL. So we can specify notes, which is this app name, notes.urls. Not notes, my notes, the app, which is my notes. So my notes.urls. So this is it. This is everything that we have to do. Now, what we will do is we can again run migration. So make migration and okay, let me just check this. Yes, I missed an N here. So there's a spelling mistake. That's why the error. I just missed an N there. That's it. There is no problem. So no changes detected. Perfect. Then we can run our migrate. Okay, done. And now we can go ahead and run server. So now I'm going to run the server. Done. Now this server will be accessible. Okay, so if I just copy this or open this up, this will still take us to an output. Okay, and you can see that the output here is different, but it tells us that we have something available. We have a path called slash API slash notes. So if I go there, okay, then hopefully we should be able to see some output, but that output will not show up in a browser because it's a JSON return, a JSON response. So for that, we use something called the Thunder client. This is again something available within VS Code. So if I just run this here, uh, okay, let me just check this out 1 second. So in our URLs, we have the path as empty. And then here we have slash API slash notes. That should take us to my notes. Okay, that's the problem. And my notes dot URLs. All right. Okay, that should be good. Just give me a minute. I just have to plug my laptop in. Just a minute. Otherwise the system will shut off. So yes, just give me 1 minute. Okay, yes, the system is connected. So let's quickly check what is going on. right? So in our notes, yes, we should get a response. Okay, so what we're trying to do here is, let me just test this out once, and then I'll tell you what is going on. This should be working. It's not finding that one, which means it's a problem with the project level URL. We are specifying the path. Okay, what we'll do is we'll just try to run migrations once again. And changes, okay. Let's run the server again. And okay, it says not found. Okay, let me try to explain the flow to you once again. So hopefully we'll understand what went wrong when we go back to the flow. So step one, like we've already seen, is to create a model. I'll not go back to that because we've already done this several times. Right? I've already talked about it several times. So here we are creating the model, and this is basically all the data fields that we want our node to contain. For this, we have done one additional package installation called UUID, which gives us access to unique user IDs, right? It gives us access to unique user IDs. So that's something that we have done. Okay. Now the next thing that we have done is we have made a serializer for it. So serializer is basically going to take the serialization, or basically take the data that we want to send as a response, and it will convert it to JSON. On the contrary, on the other side, it will take the data coming to our application and convert it from JSON to Python, so that Python is able to understand the data coming, and it is also able to convert it back to JSON whenever it wants to send data. So that middleware conversion of data to and from JSON is happening with this piece of code, right? So when we say serializer, it will automatically work with JSON data. Okay, it can also work with other things. Like if you wanted to work with XML, there is another format for it. If you want to go for any other type of data, there are different formats available. This one is specifically like primarily for JSON data. Then we have created a view. So this is going to be our public view. Right? This is what we want to return to the user. So what we want to do is we have created a URL, okay, which is our path. So when the user comes to this path, what we want to do is we want them to be able to see the response that we are sending. Okay. So here we are importing path. This is a custom file that we have created. So we're importing path. We are importing our nodes view, which we have created. And then we are saying that whenever the user reaches this path, which is empty path, okay, it means, or we should send the nodes view. They should be taken to the nodes UI. In the nodes UI, we are specifying that we want to return response if it is a GET request. Okay, so this is what we are trying to do. Whenever we receive a GET request, we are, we want to take all the nodes from our database. We want to convert them to JSON, and we want to return a response, which will just send all the nodes. We can also add a message here. So let's call it message. This is a response, for example. Okay. So this is what we are looking at sending back to the user. Now, There is one final change which we have done is after adding the URL to the app level, we also have to create a URL on the project level. So in the project level URLs, we have also created a path which is going to include my notes.urls. So let me see if we can access it. No, right? This is fine. So my notes must be specified in the project level settings, which is here. Okay. So if it is not specified here, then that will not work. So that's there. And then within that, we have the URLs file. It is accessible, as you can see. When we click on the file, it takes us to the correct file. So it is accessible, okay, which means that the setup is all good, right? Which means we should be able to see the response as well. I'm just trying to figure out what is missing because it's in the output. It is basically saying when we try to access it, it is saying that this is not found. If I just run this, it says not found. So I'm just trying to figure out why that is. But yes, so in the meanwhile, what I will do is I will quickly upload this to GitHub and I'll give you guys 5 minutes. So give me also 5 minutes so I can figure out what is wrong in the output. But yes, so just give me 1 minute. I will upload this on GitHub so that you can also quickly set the rest of it up in the meanwhile. And I'll quickly, figure out what is wrong in just a minute. And then I'll tell you the correction over there. But I don't think anything is wrong in the code because everything is linked properly. But still, I'll just try to figure out what is going on and why it is not working. In the meanwhile, I'll quickly give you the code so that you can also catch up till here. So just give me 1 minute. I am just going to quickly upload it. So this will go under session 11. Okay, I'm just adding another folder called session 11 and I am just uploading this one. So again, it's not a problem when you face an error. I mean, you will face countless errors in the real world. So it's fine. You just have to understand the MVC structure. So first we create the model, then we create the view, and then the URLs.py basically is our controller. That will decide where the control is or where the where we are going when the user is accessing a particular URL. So based on the error, it is basically telling us that there is something wrong with that URL setup only. But yes, I'll figure it out. So in the meanwhile, I have updated this on GitHub. So please take a few minutes to get this code from GitHub. It is here, session 11 notes. Okay, so everything is there. Please take that from there and try to follow along, like try to get the code on your system. And in the meanwhile, I'm just trying to figure out what is going on over here. I will have to disable the chat if you guys continue that discussion. So I am not sure what is going on in the chat, but um, no, Shravan. So we will never there will never be any need in which you have to enter the full system path because this is a virtual environment. So whatever we are doing will be within that environment. So we will never need access to that thing. But yes, so I've given the GitHub link in the chat. The code is updated over there. You can just check. In the meanwhile, there's something wrong here. I'll just figure out. Uh, So again, whenever you are done with the code thing, just let me know that you are done. And I'm just taking a minute to quickly find out the problem and I'll just fix it. Okay, so there you go. It was a single bracket thing. So the problem was I had written slash API slash notes, and this would mean that we have to include two slash in the URL. So that would mean something like this double slash, which is a problem. So basically the error is to remove this uh, slash, and that will then fix it. So now if we try to run it in the Thunder client and I send it, you can see the response coming in. Right? It says this is response. That's our message. And obviously the notes for now is empty. We have not really written any note. Okay. So again, let me just walk you through what is going on. I also want to give you a quick walkthrough of this Thunder client, so that you know what it is and you know what you can test with it. Okay. So again, first up, we have created our model. Once the model was in place, we created a serializer. This is going to be, converting our model to and from JSON. Then we created a view. Okay, this is the response that we want to send. So on view, we can define whatever request we want. There are 5 requests in total. We have the get request for basically getting data. So from a user perspective, we have 5 requests. The first request is the get request. Okay. So the get request is sent by the user when they want to get something, fetch something from our database. Then we have something called the put request. The put request is sent by the user when they want to insert something into the database, right? So when we want to take a new note from the user or something like that, that's a put request. Then we have something called, sorry, my bad. That's not a put, that's a post request. Sorry, my bad. So get is for fetching data. Then we have something called post. Post is for sending data. So when the user wants to send something to the server for insertion into the database, we go for post. Then we have something called put and patch. So put slash patch. These are two requests which are used for updation. So put and patch are for updation. Put will basically replace the entire data, and patch is basically updating of existing data. So it will modify existing data and not replace it. Put will replace the entire thing, right? And then we have something called the delete request. So delete is obviously for deletion. So these are the 5 different HTTP requests that we have available from the user end, right? So when I say from the user end, it means a user can send any 5 of these requests. Get is for fetching data. Post is for sending data from the user perspective. Right? Get is for fetching data. Post is for sending data. Put and patch is for updation. And delete is for deletion. These are the 5. We call them HTTP methods. Okay. We call them HTTP methods. Basically, these are 5 actions that a user can perform on any API endpoint. Now, obviously APIs are backend, right? So we can't really see them in the screen on the output. We can't really see that in the output because we are only sending and receiving JSON data. So for this, we have a couple of different apps that are available. There was one application which was very famous for this kind of code checking. It was called Postman. Right? Postman was a very famous application. It is still there, but now what has happened is, this particular Postman required us to create an account and registration and all of that. So there is a new extension available in VS Code called Thunder Client, which is what I was using to test the code. So this is what that extension looks like. I will just show you. Thunder client. It's made by Ritvik, I think. There was the owner was mentioned somewhere, but either way, so there is this one. This is the one I'm talking about, Thunder client. It's a very famous extension now. A lot of people are using it, and what it basically does is it basically simplifies the whole experience for us. And what it does, just give me 1 second, please. Uh, just a second. I just want to disable the waiting room. Right. Okay, my bad. Yes, so done. So basically, Thunder Client is an extension which can be used for testing the API endpoints that we are creating, right? So I'm just going to delete everything that is here so that we can start from a blank thing. So you can also just go to extensions, which is here, this box icon in VS Code, and just look for this one and install it. That's it. You don't have to do anything. Just click on the install button and it should basically install it for you. Now, what Thunder Client lets us do is it lets us connect to backend to get the data. Okay, we can do the exact same thing using fetch on JavaScript on our front end. We will do that also. But for now, I just want to show it to you because while development, we don't want to rewrite the JavaScript code again and again. It takes a lot of time. So instead, we test it like this during development. Of course, on the front end, when we create the project, we will see how to fetch this using JavaScript on the front end as well. So in this Thunder Client extension, we have to open a new request. Okay, it opens up like this. Then over here, we have a couple of things. First, in this drop down, it has everything that I just told you. Get, post, put, delete, and patch. These are the 5 methods that are available. Now, if you check the code that we have written in our view, you can see we have written a get code, right? Define get. So in the exact same way, we can define post, we can define delete, we can define patch and put. So we can define all of them like so. Okay. So for now, we have only defined a get request. So which means that the user can only access get for now. Okay. Then what is our URL? Well, if we go to the urls.py file, it's empty. And on the system level, it is this. So basically, when the user connects to this endpoint, okay, again, we have to enter our server URL. So let me get that from our terminal. So this will change, right? This will be like www.yourwebsite.com, whatever, and then followed by the view or the URL that we have created on the system level. That's API notes. Okay. Now, as soon as I enter that, as soon as we hit that URL, what Thunder client is going to do is it is going to connect to this URL in the backend, and it is going to show us the response on this right hand side. So if I go to run this request, right, send this request, you can see that this is the response that we are getting. And if we check our code in the view, this is exactly what we are responding. You can see notes, serializer.data empty. Currently, there is no note, and message. This is response. You can see that is the exact response that we get. And we also get the status 200 OK, which means everything is good, right? Now, when we fetch using JavaScript in the front end, we will also get exactly this. But that is something that we will discuss when we make the project. Okay. So for now, what we should be able to do is we should be able to create an endpoint. I'm going to give you one more example wherein we want to take the data coming from the user and store it. So it's going to be very simple. We just have to modify our view and add 4 more lines here. So we'll make a post request as well. Okay, this will again be self comma request. So this request will give us access to any data coming from the user. So we can say directly, we can say collection. Okay, collection dot insert. Hold on. No, we have to first serialize the data just like we did here. Right? We have to first serialize this data. So we can say sales.serializer. And this time it needs to be request.data. So request.data. This is our serialization, right? So we are taking the request data that the user will send, okay, and we will serialize it. Once we have this, we can check if the serializer is valid, which means if the serializer is able to successfully convert the data to Python, which means that the user has entered data properly as mentioned. Okay. So then we want to save it. So we'll say serializer.save. This will save the data into our database. Okay. Once the data is saved, we can return response and we can say, let's say status. We can say success. Okay. And we can also then return the data. So that will be data. And then again, we can say here, no, which note was inserted. We can basically respond with that, right? So this will be like serializer dot data. Okay. And then we can go ahead and we can send a custom response code. So we can say, for example, status is equal to, and then we can type in status dot, I think I missed uh, bracket there. Yes. And then status dot HTTP, and we can choose from any of these statuses. So 201 is created. When the user is trying to create a new node, we can respond with this, right? So this is our response, and that's it. If something is wrong, then we can write the else case, but for now we don't need it. So this is our post route. Now what will happen is we should be able to accept data coming from the user, and we should be able to store it. That data will get stored. And then if we go back to the get route, we should be able to see the updated data. Okay. So again, let's give this a try. We have to restart our server for this. So let us actually stop our server. It's a good practice to stop and restart the server when you make some API changes. So since we have added a new endpoint, it makes sense to restart. Now, first up, we'll go for post. Then in the body, we can provide the JSON data, right? In JSON data. Now, what all do we want here? We want the title of the note. Okay, so let's say cook food, for example. Then we want, so JSON data will be like this. Everything needs to be in string. Okay, let's say what are we cooking? Let's go for Chinese item. Okay, I'm just writing it randomly. And then we need a category. I think we need status. Okay, so status will be again false by default. So these are the three data items, and this time we want the post route. I will send it. As soon as I do this, you can see it says status success 201 created. Okay. And then it will tell us the data of the node that just got created. So we were now able to successfully insert a node into our data. We can also see the date timestamp. It is today's date and current time. Now, if we go back to our get now, okay, and I will run this again, you can see that in the nodes array that was otherwise empty, we now get one note as a response. So effectively, we have been able to save data into our backend, and we have also been able to respond with that data, retrieve it, and send it back to the front end. So we have been able to do both of these things. Okay, so this is the idea. Okay. So again, for people who are wondering, since the very first day, I am telling you Django is a backend framework which is used for creating API endpoints, right? Remember a random user application. What do we do over there? Well, we went to that application, right, slash API, and we were able to get some data for our front end. In the exact same way, now we have created that for our own self, our own app. Okay. So now if I just take this endpoint and let us say that I open our JavaScript project. I don't remember which session it was. Let's check. No, not this one. 7 was Python, so it will be 6. Yes. So remember this project, this code that we had written earlier to fetch books and all. Now we can do the exact same thing for our custom data. Right. So if I just enable this, what I will do is I will change the link to this. This is our data now. Right? This is what we are getting. And then once we get the data, we can have the title of the note. Okay. So this will be, I think this is from the screen, but we can just console log it for now. So we can just go for console.log data. Okay. Now, what we are trying to do is instead of fetching data from any other third-party API, we have created our own API. So now if I open it, okay, and hopefully when we go to the console, we should be able to see the data that will come from our own backend. I think that was disabled because it is running on the same port. So our backend was stopped by this one because it's running on the same port. Right? You can see 127001. Front end also started running on the same port, which is why it is giving a problem. But effectively, what we have done here is we have created our own custom backend. Okay, our own custom API, right? So for any web application, we have two components. Rather, we have three components. Right? We have front end, back end, and database. So front end, we have already discussed till session 7. We were talking about front end. Then from session 7 onwards till session 11, we have talked about backend, which is how do we create our own custom URL endpoints. And then from like the next session, we will talk about the database, which is MySQL. Okay. So once we discuss the database, then we will be able to create all three components for us. So again, if you remember in that example, in the Google Books example, right? Let me just run that again. So if you remember in this project, what we did was we took some title from the user. We were able to send it to the backend and we were able to respond with the backend data. Right now, I disabled that one. Let me just enable that code again. Right. So we were able to send some data like this and we got some response of books like this, right? Now, in the exact same way, what is happening now is we have now created our own custom backend. So now instead of connecting to Google's API like this, what we can do is we can send a request to our backend server and we can respond from that server itself. So we have created our own backend for now. That's what we are doing with Django, right? Now, that's basically what Django is all about. Right? Now, we will discuss more about authentication, authorization, etc. In the next couple of sessions when we make the project. But effectively, on a very, bottom level, a very simple level, this is what Django allows us to do. It allows us to create backend endpoints, and we can then respond with the corresponding JSON data or respond to those endpoints. So far we have only seen two of the 5 functions. Just like this, we have put, patch, and delete, which are also HTTP methods that are available when creating APIs, right? So that's the setup. Okay, Abhiram, if you're getting the not that error, please remove the slash in this file. So this is the system level URL file. Just remove the slash from here. That should be fine. That's the error. Okay. And you will not get the output in the browser. It will keep showing you not found. You have to run it on Thunder client and only then it will work. Okay, that's one thing. And another thing is you have to mention that this thing in settings, my notes here. This is important. And then of course, run migrations again. So if you haven't run it before, please run migrations once again. Um, so again, Manoj, this is not a project as such. Okay, we are just discussing how to create API endpoints. So you can just mention that creating API endpoints. That's our project for today. But yes, so coming back to these two, like I was saying, we have 3 more methods, put, patch, and delete, which we will discuss later. But today we are talking about only put and patch, right? Or rather get and post. So put, patch, delete, we will discuss later. Today we're talking about get and post. So get is for sending data to the user. And from the user side, it is fetching data on the front end. So for the user, it is getting data. For the server, it is sending data. Right. So what we are doing here is we are basically taking everything from the table. This objects.all will get all nodes from our database. Then we are converting it to JSON via serialization. And then we are sending it in the response. So if you see the response, we have to create the note again for this, but I will show you. So once we send this in post, okay, the data. Okay, I don't know what went wrong there. Okay, no worries, we'll fix it. But yes, the point is that we are creating 2 methods, get and post. So post is for sending data and then get is for receiving data. So you can see here, oh yes, the problem is we didn't change the title. So yeah, the problem is we have another node with the same title. So that's why we can change the title, let's say, travel or something, and this will work fine. But either way, my point is that get is for receiving data by the user and post is for sending. So in the get, this line takes everything from the database. This line converts it to JSON, and this line sends it to the user. Similarly, in the post, the first step is to read the data from the user. That's what we are doing here. Right? We are saying serializer is equal to data equal to request.data. So basically take the data coming from the user, which in our case is this data, title, content, and status. Take that data which is coming from the user and serialize it, convert it to Python. If you're able to successfully convert it, then save. Save means insert it into the database. Okay, so insert the data into the database, and then we are saying tell the user that the data was inserted successfully. That's it. So now if I change it to post, and hopefully when I change the title, because it's a unique field, and send it, you can see it gets created successfully. And then if we run it for get again, we will get two data items. This time we are getting the first node, which was cook food, and also the second node, which is travel. Okay, so effectively we have been able to receive data from the user, store it in the database, and send it back to the user as well. So these three things are now done. We are left with two other things: update the data and delete it. Those two things are left, which we will discuss in the next one, and we'll talk more about database, like sorting, etc., etc. So yes, and again, for everybody who is sending these connection messages, please don't. Okay, because the idea is that I will have to disable the chat if that goes on, and I just want people to be able to ask doubts in the chat. So yes, admin.py, here you go, Abhiram. That's the admin code. But anyway, I will update this code also in a few minutes. But yes, so I know that Django can get a little complicated and a little confusing, but just remember the MVC architecture. That's effectively how it is working, right? First, we create a model. Then for that model, we create a view, and the URL will decide which view is shown to the user. So URL is effectively our controller. So model, view, and controller. Three things: model, view, controller. That's all there is to it, right? So model is our data setup, view is our endpoint setup, and then controller is in the URLs. Based on the path, we are deciding which view to be shown to the user. That's our model, view, and controller. Now, coming to this Thunder client. So what this Thunder client lets us do is it will let us check or test our server. Okay, it will let us test our server. So whenever we create any API endpoint, we should be able to see that over here. So again, I will repeat it. I know it's confusing, but we don't have, a lot of time to go through it several times. But again, like today, I repeated the whole creation process. Tomorrow in the next session, I will repeat the whole API creation process again. We'll start with a blank project. We'll create it, and then we'll discuss the remaining parts, which is updation and deletion. So that's the agenda for the next one. And then in the last three sessions, we should be able to create a mini project, like a Goodreads project. Not everything there is in Goodreads, but a basic level of it, so that we'll be able to understand this even better, right? So yes, that's our Django setup. Quickly coming to Thunder client. So the attendance link will again be shared in a few minutes. It can only be activated 15 minutes before the end time, so that's after 6:45. The team will send it there. But yes, coming quickly to this Thunder client. So Thunder client is a very important tool for backend development. What it basically does is it allows us to test our code. Okay, so whatever code we have created, we can test it in Thunder client. So whenever we make a new request, we have a couple of different things here. First up, we can choose the method. So like I told you, there are 5 methods. They are listed down here: get, post, put, delete, and patch. These are the 5 methods available. Then we specify the URL. This is what we get in the terminal after we start our server, right? So if you remember, we get that 127 thing in the terminal itself once we start our server. This one, right? 127.0.0.1, that's a localhost URL. And then after that, we have to type our custom URL. So we can then type based on what we have created. Like in this case, this is our URL. So we can just type that, and we can click on the send button. Now, if there is some data to be sent, for example, in the post request, we want to send some JSON data. So for that, we can go to the body tab. Okay, and in the body tab, we can put JSON data like this. So JSON is always string. it has to be both sides string. Okay, even if it's a number or a Boolean value, whatever it is, it must be string. That's how JSON is. So even if you have, like number, you still have to send it like this. You can't send it like this. It will give you a cross. It will give you a cross when you have multiple items. So safe side, JSON is always string. So you can just put it like this and then send the data. Okay. If you're not sending any data, if it is only get request, then you can directly send it. So as soon as you send a request, you will see the status, time, and size of the response, and the actual response, the JSON response, will show up on the right hand side. Okay. Similarly for post, again, if we just provide those details, I will just copy it from there. Okay, so we have title, content, and status, three things. And let's change this to teach, for example, and let's say this is Django, and I send it. You can see we again get the response on the right hand side, and all the queries get saved. So all our requests are saved on the left. So if you want to quickly repeat a request, you can just see the corresponding tag like get, post, whatever, and quickly go back and send it. Again, if I send get now, we get 3 notes, as you can see, right? And even if we stop the server and we restart the server, this is still going to store the data because it is in that virtual environment. So as long as the virtual environment is running, we should be able to get the data. Like it will be persistently stored, permanently stored. It's not like on refresh we lose it, unlike front end, because this is not front end, right? So it is not like when we refresh it, we will lose the data. This will stay permanently because we are working with um, you know, databases here. So we are storing it in an actual database. It's not like we are storing it temporarily. So it will be stored permanently. So even if we run the same thing tomorrow, if we start the server tomorrow, it should still be able to give us all the previous data. All of that should still be accessible, right? So yes, that's our setup with this Thunder client. And again, you can just close it off. It opens up like a new text file only. So when you open a new request, it opens up like a new file, just like we have all our code files. It opens up just like that. So we can test whatever we want and close it off. Now we will explore it in more detail, like we will go for cookies, etc. when we use authentication. So basically that is how authentication works. When somebody logs into a website, we create a cookie in their name. And as long as the cookie stays in the system, they don't have to enter the password again. But when the cookie expires, then we ask them to re-enter the password. So that's the kind of setup that we have for authentication, right? But that's basically what we have for this particular backend setup. And again, I'm going to quickly take a minute to update the code because I made some changes to it, right? So let me just I will just re-upload it. Okay. So again, what I want you guys also to do is before our next session on Friday, do spend some time, just trying to try this out. So I'm giving you the code right away so that you can just experiment with it. Once you have this code in your system, it will work directly. You don't have to make any changes to it, right? It will automatically work. So you can just try this out and you should be able to do two things. You should be able to like create a note and get it back. These two things you should be able to do. Then updation deletion we will discuss in the next one. And again, we'll then go to the project from there. Okay. So again, I will repeat this entire thing, basically even the get post part in the next session once again, because I know that Django gets very confusing. So I will just go through this quickly in the first 15-20 minutes, and then we'll work on the updation and deletion, right? So yes, you have the code available now on GitHub. So please make sure that you take it from there and make sure you try it out before you attend the next session. All right, perfect. So that's basically it for this one, right? Thank you so much, you guys, for attending. The attendance link is now in the chat, so please take that and fill that in. Make sure you fill the feedback. And yes, that's basically it. Thank you so much, you guys, for attending. The next session will be on Friday. The timings will be sent to you on the group. So yes, see you then. Bye bye.